This is going to be, for me, one of the most ambitious trips I have ever undertaken. And here's why. Mainly because it's such a long one, and where I'm going to is so remote. Like some of the programs in the previous series, I am completely on my own. I have no camera crew with me. I am completely alone. Myself and my vehicle. You see? Nobody around. I'm going to take a nostalgic trip back as to why I am so blessed, so lucky to be doing this job, and it's something that I am so passionate about. It all started here, actually, in England, when I was 14. My father bought a Range Rover. I've brought my family here on an uncharacteristically bright, warm and sunny day in England, to the place that the very first time I sat in a four-wheel drive vehicle and was taken off-road. It was my father's Range Rover. He drove it up onto the field, turned it around and drove it back off again. That simple act excited me so much. The very idea that a vehicle like this could give you so much freedom. I will never forget that moment. I was completely besotted with this vehicle. You should have seen my bedroom. I had posters with Range Rovers in all positions. And it was through this Ford that he drove it, with me in the passenger seat. It was a childish fantasy that one day I should do what that vehicle was capable of. I have, of course, migrated from the Range Rover, or more accurately, perhaps the Range Rover has migrated from me. My current mount is a 2005 Toyota Land Cruiser 105 series wagon, a relatively uncomplicated and reliable vehicle, which the current Range Rover no longer is. On this journey, it's got to take me about 25,000 kilometers. It already has 130,000 kilometers on the Odo. And because I am traveling mostly on my own, at times I will be relying on it for my life. One of the reasons why I was so obsessed with this Range Rover was that 2 years earlier my dad had taken me to the Okavango. It is a place of exquisite beauty in the Kalahari, where this river, the Okavango River, spills out like a bucket of water over a kitchen floor. It spills out over this vast area of desert. And it is a pristine wonderland even today. Taken there when I was 12, I was absolutely captivated. You see, even then, I was recording things on a tape recorder. My father had a Super 8 camera, and you can hear it in my voice.
Of the trees, and the outline of the grass, and shining waters.
So from that point on, we went back to England, mesmerized by this idea of going back to the Okavango in a four-wheel drive on our own, which is exactly what we did. We bundled our Range Rover onto a mail ship. We came to South Africa to stay. In fact, the very first time I ever sat behind the steering wheel of a vehicle was that Range Rover in the Maremi Wildlife Reserve, which is in the Okavango. The Okavango, which is I see as the source of all this for me personally, its origins are in the highlands of Angola. And that's where I'm going to go, to find the source of the Okavango. Then I'm going to follow the river all the way down until it reaches the panhandle, where it begins to slowly spread out into the Kalahari thirstland and vanishes into the desert, absorbed by the heat of the sun. I welcome you to the show. Namibia greets me on the first day of my expedition with a spectacular airborne display. The main purpose of this trip through Namibia is basically to take me from my hometown, which is Cape Town, north to Angola. It would be a complete waste of time to drive through this magnificent country and not actually spend some time on the way through. One of the things you have to put up with getting through Namibia are these interminable long stretches of hot, dry gravel where the scenery is really uninteresting, and if you suffer from agoraphobia you go absolutely mad. As for me, I absolutely love it.
There are, on these desolate, barren plains, places like this. This is solitaire. It can only be described as an oasis. This one with some rather eclectic garden furniture.
You know, my trouble is, I just can't get enough of views like this. I just can't get enough of this. While I find myself on a lonely, windswept, grassy plain in the Namib. Tomorrow I'll hit the coast. But right now I'm going to get a jersey on. It's a bit windy and a little bit cold. You can see if you look very carefully, there's a line below the horizon. That line is a line of fog. The Namib is categorized by the fog that occurs every single morning along the coastline, sometimes drifting inland, sometimes not, and it's caused by the hot, dry desert meeting the frigid Atlantic, and I'm driving towards that line of fog now. Well, I've made it to the coastline, the frigid, angry Atlantic. But you know, I've been here before, and looking at it again, I actually think this part of the coastline is actually very boring. It's very dull. Because from here, about 500 kilometers north, nothing changes. Occasionally, you do get interesting places like the one directly behind the camera.
This is Vlotskasbaken, built in the classical colonial style with large gardens and wide streets. Plenty of room for those. I don't get this place. These are obviously holiday homes, boarded up against the elements. But who would want to come here on holiday? Perhaps I have my answer. Some properties even have their own lighthouses, presumably to prevent them being hit by ships. And there are others wish that their house was built on another coastline altogether.
So anyway, I'm not sure if I'm going to stick to the coast for very much longer. It's called the Skeleton Coast because of the skeletons of all the shipwrecks, except those that are not under the sand are under the water, and those that are protruding from the sand, because of the climate, they deteriorate and disintegrate so rapidly, there are very, very few wrecks left.
Except for this one. It's the Zila, a trawler that went aground while being towed for scrapping, broke its line and drifted ashore. That was in August 2008. I'm surprised that during the 2 years it's been sitting here, it's still so intact.
It is stupefyingly desolate, this road. They call it the Salt Road. I'm not sure if it's because it's made of salt, or whether there are people that transport salt on it, or whether vehicles rust so quickly in this area that it's as if the road was made of salt. I'm not sure. It travels all the way up on this road without break, all the way to the Koneni River. I'm not allowed to travel. You need a special permit, special permission to travel on this road right up to the border at the north. But who would want to do it anyway, because it really is monotonous. It doesn't change very much at all. And what I thought I would do now is go to a place called Cape Cross Lodge. I don't know if they've got camping. Maybe I'll stay at the lodge. I don't know. And then go for a day visit into the Skeleton Coast Park itself, and then head inland. Cape Cross in the year 6,685 after the creation of the world, and 1,485 after the birth of Christ, the brilliant, foresighted King John II of Portugal ordered
Diego Cao, knight of his court, to discover this land and to erect this padrille here. This is Cape Cross Seal Colony, about little less than 100 kilometers north of Swakopmund. So I said earlier that this coastline is very, very boring. If you stay on the road, it is dead boring. You've got to know where to go. You've got to actually get off the road and go and, you know, if you see a signpost, and even if it looks uninteresting, take it. And then there are places of interest. It's quite smelly. The lovely noise of the chatter and the shouting and the bickering of all the seals. They're very, very content here, very, very happy here. There are not a lot of seals on this coast, but for isolated areas like this where they're protected. When they pitch up in other parts, the fishermen tend to not like it very much, and there have been lots of reports of seal shootings and clubbings and dreadful things like that. Here they are protected. This is actually a reserve, and they're all, well, most of them are having an afternoon sleep.
Which is why tonight I'm going to seek some comfort. Cape Cross Lodge is the only vaguely comfortable lodge on this coast, apart from Terrace Bay, 200 kilometers north, which I understand is really only suited to fishermen. Cape Cross, I have found, has far more appeal.
You know, the best single reason for not camping on this coast is this. The wind is freezing.
This is how we do these apparent high-speed shots. Firstly, we photograph the surf as it is, normal speed, and then we photograph the sun setting real quick by shooting one frame every second. The camera does that for me. And then we put the two together and it looks like this.
The trouble is, of course, when the sun disappears, we still have its reflection on the sea.
You know, I am so glad that I didn't camp last night. The wind howled a whole night. Would have been awful. Really, really, really glad I found myself comfort. I had a lovely dinner last night. Gee, the food was good there. Really, really good. So, heading north on the Salt Road. It's a bit like those roads in Europe where there's heavy snow, where there are those markers next to the road to indicate where the road is in the case of heavy snowfalls. It's exactly the same here. There are markers to indicate where the road runs in the cases of heavy wind, where the sand, of course, obliterates the road completely. I'm now going to try, this is a bit of a long shot. In 1984, 2 years after I bought my first four-wheel drive, I came up this road and looking for a place to camp outside of the Skeleton Coast National Park, to which we're heading now. I pulled off to go and find a place to camp on the beach, and I found a wreck. Now the bits of steel, parts of a crane, a few other bits and pieces were actually left high and dry. The coast had actually receded and they were left high and dry. Now imagine if I could stumble on them again. It was not in the days of GPSs, so I didn't take a GPS fix. I just remember it was not far south of the park boundary. I'm going to go and see if I can find it. Long shot. Worth a try. Alright. I've been looking on the GPS and I found something that might be of great use to us. I have loaded into the GPS Tracks for Africa. For those of you who don't know what Tracks for Africa is, basically it's a collection of people that travel throughout Southern Africa, submit their GPS logs, track data to a website called Tracks for Africa, and they have compiled this very impressive piece of data about the place where I think this shipwreck may be, and I found shipwreck unknown. So I'm going to say go to shipwreck unknown. Here's hoping it's the same shipwreck.
This is the wreck of the Winston. I don't think it's the wreck. Pretty sure it's not the wreck. Then again, it could be, but I remember there were lots and lots of bits of cranes. Anyway, I'll have to look at the photographs to verify it, but this is not the one on the GPS. This is another one that was actually signposted, so I thought I'd come down and take a look anyway. The other one, still got to go further north.
Alright, so the GPS says we go off the road here. It's not much of a track, but it's something. There are some areas here look a bit tricky traction wise. They look a bit soft. I must just tread carefully. I'm completely on my own. This is a bad sign, you see. When tracks do this into the ground, it's a bad sign. Oh, look at that. No, this is impossible. You know, I don't remember it being this far away from the main road, but then again, my memory's not that good, best of times. And I certainly didn't have to drive over difficult ground to get here. I remember it was quite sandy, it was quite hilly, there was a ridge that I had to drive over, and it was quite soft because of the sand. This is mud. But the good news is a track. I'll just take it easy. This reminds me of driving over the salt pans. Gotta be careful, I'm all on my own here.
I can see the wreck ahead. I'm sure it's not like I remember. This one's much smaller, and besides, I remember the shoreline being quite rocky.
Well, no, it's not the place that I stayed at in 1984. It's completely different, but this is an entire boat. A small one, mind you, but this is a shipwreck.
Whenever I have done one of these solo expeditions, I find that after a few days, loneliness produces a kind of benign insanity. I never know when it's going to strike, but struck it has.
Now you're being very silly. Now stop it. I said earlier that it was boring. Take it all back. Imagine somebody being wrecked ashore here. What would they think? Oh boy, we're saved. Oh, we got to land. Oh wow. Hold on a minute. Oh, they got to get back in the boat.
The southern gate to the Skeleton Coast Park. My intention is to make a brief visit before I head east and then north again. And then a little bit east and then north, a bit more, and the first thing I see are jackal footprints that lead the way to an unsightly mess of tangled steel.
This is the bird colony. I call it that because signpost, the first word is gone, so we'll just call it the bird colony. I'm not sure why they call it the bird colony. It's not a bird for 1,000 miles. It's just a whole lot of rust, and I wonder what this place was. Maybe it was a bird colonizing factory. They brought birds in here, indoctrinated them, and let them go, and so colonizing birds.
Well, you come up with a better idea.
Okay, well, stop. Enough. Just before leaving home on this expedition, I travelled to England. I thought it would be a good idea to spend some time with, people. I also went to prepare for my forthcoming trip to the Okavango, to Cambridge and onto the River Cam to see if I could still pole a mokoro.
And we're going to sink now, because Dad's driving.
A mokoro in Botswana is a dugout canoe, in England it's a canoe.
Or one shove and he falls in.
I have never pushed a punt before. And it's a bit like a very heavy mokoro. I'm not finding it quite as easy as I thought I would. Mainly because my family are making jokes.
The experiment was a success. I'm ready to face the Okavango. But that's another 5 weeks away.
Enormous fun.
That was so cool.
Right. This is where I'm going to leave the sea and the Skeleton Coast Park. Sea's over there. That road up there continues to a place called Terrace Bay, where there's a little lodge, and Tora Bay, and eventually Maui Bay, and eventually, in fact, then there's the road up there. You're not allowed there. You can't even get a permission to drive that road, and eventually reaches the Kunene with the border with Angola. Instead, I'm going to take what I think is going to be a far more interesting route, and that is that way, east. I'm not really sure what's ahead of me, but I'll be travelling east a bit and then north a bit on my way to the Kunene.
My trip back in 1984 also took me through this part of Damaraland, and it's here that I remember getting stuck in the sand. And it's here that, for the very first time, I learnt how to use a winch. You're not allowed to laugh. Well, you can if you like, I suppose.
This absolutely exquisite place that I find myself in. Travelling along the main road, I saw a large signboard, Gaurib Lodge and Rest Camp, camping. I thought that looked good. Went in there. But disappointing. People. Too many people. Kids. Nice campsite, but nothing special. Then I passed the community campsite. Then I passed this. This is called Living Canyon campsite. It's beautiful, but there's nobody around to take money from me. It's obviously a community campsite, but well, I decided in fact not to camp down at the river, as nice as it was down there, because the attraction and appeal of hot water and a hot shower was a little bit stronger than the scenery. So I'm here at the community campsite where my donkey boiler has been lit. I'm going to go and have a quick shower.
Damaraland is a dry place. Rarely do any of its rivers flow. But the Herneb is flowing quite strongly. It's such a wonderful thing to see, because only rarely do these rivers ever flow.
And it bodes very, very well for my trip to Angola, because I understand that the rivers are flowing strongly, and of course we're going to be following them upstream to find the source of the Okavango. Amazing. Hello. Well, this is where my adventure really begins, because this is where it starts getting very, very remote. I've turned off from Sesfontein, I filled up with my fuel, I'm full of water. I'm now heading along the valley of the Herneb River, and I've been told that this is where the desert elephants live. I've never seen them before, and I'm determined to find them.